Welcome to the OIC, otherwise known as the Omnipresent Information Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Peterson.
And I'm the co-host, Noah Hansen. The Omnipresent Information Connection Podcast is all about your world and your unique walk on this path called life. We present fascinating, life-changing information from around the world that has been validated. We also authenticate the information by providing you with links to where you can find out more about what we are talking about on our show. This podcast includes historically accurate, genuine facts that have helped shape our daily lives into what they are today. Welcome, one and all, to another exciting episode of the OIC Podcast. In this episode, we're going to be doing the Source Podcast Part 2. So on this podcast, we resource you to information that connects you with an omnipresent perspective in your world today, allows you to apply the techniques, apply the teachings that we feature on this podcast in order to improve your life in a positive way every single day. I'm here with Kevin Peterson, and as you know, Kevin Peterson is the wonderful host of the OIC Podcast. How are you today, Kevin?
I'm doing great. I'm really doing well. I think that this topic today is just going to be absolutely awe-inspiring because of the fact of how we are presenting it today.
Yes, as we said on the last podcast, if you haven't listened to the Source Part 1, we told you that on this podcast, we would not only be featuring the source and resourcing ourselves, but also God's hand in the world today. We're going to be taking a deeper dive into fear, the acronym of fear that we've developed here at the OIC Podcast. And if you are unfamiliar with that, we feature that in the Authentic Intentions video.
Oh, that was episode. a good video.
Yes, that was our very first video, actually.
Yeah.
That we did on this podcast. So if you did watch that video already, you'll know that fear, the acronym that Kevin had developed for the OIC, is follow every available resource. Fear.
Boom. Yep.
Now, Kevin, what is fear? What's the other acronym?
The negative, yes, the malevolent.
That's right.
Is false examples, false expressions appearing real.
Right. So we're going to be talking about this in this podcast because God's hand in the world today is not the source of everything that's happening in the world today. There are very malevolent things that are happening in the world today that are unfortunately happening, but it is a event. These are events that the Bible can shed some light on. Many people in the world today may think that God doesn't exist because there are evil things happening in the world. But we're going to go into why that is something that we can actually shed some light on as far as what's taught to us by God through the Bible.
Yes, we're going to take a gentle walk in that discovery so that we together can be able to bond together in absolutely purified harmony and to be able to restore the believing truth of God's Word.
That's right. All right, so those are the three topics we're going into today. We are first talking about God's hand in the world today. Where do you see God's hand in the world today, Kevin?
I see God's hands in all things in the world. Now, you have to understand, listeners, is that people often want to be able to focus on the negative. They want to focus on the demonic. They want to be able to focus on all the bad things that are happening in the world. And today, I'm going to be able to shed new light on a godly perspective, to be able to bring you more joy and fulfillment and being able to know that not only God is real, God exists, but God's hand is very intimately involved in a lot of things that are going on.
That's right. So God's hand in the world today, many people would assume that's only in the churches, that's only in the religious aspects of the world, but it has nothing to do whatsoever with the malevolent things that are happening in the world today. So God's hand in the world today is much more than religion. God's hand in the world today may work through different religious events, different religiously inspired ideas and acts in the world, but God's hand has much more to do with this world than just in religion.
Yes, because listeners, keep this in mind at all times and understand that free will is a gift that keeps on giving.
That's right.
Either positively or negatively. through our free will, we have options and choices on what to be able to do with not only what is going on in the world, but what we contribute to the world to be able to either make it a better place or to be able to basically take a knee and to be able to allow other negative things to take over our daily lives.
That's right. So in my life, I have seen that God's hand was there with me. God was walking me through these different events in my life, even before I knew who God was.
Yeah.
Before I had accepted that there was a God.
Yeah, and take people on a gentle walk with that.
Well, I grew up in a United Methodist church, but I never really participated. I never really was involved. I never really cared much about it. So God wasn't very relevant to my life. He was, but in my personal perspective, I didn't think of God as being relevant as many people in the world today do. Now, from there, I got into spirituality, but not into a creator God necessarily. I wasn't searching for the creator God. I was searching for spiritual modalities that I thought just were very cool and were going to lead me to cool places, right? This is what many people would call the New Age. And so through that, I also started to be introduced to different world events that were going on sort of behind the scenes that many people are waking up to this year, 2020.
Absolutely.
And that's very exciting. God's hand has everything to do with that too. Now, from that, I also took a journey, a spiritual journey. The whole intention behind this was to awaken to who I am, to who God is, and to what my relationship with the world is today. And that journey ended up being very successful, but I still didn't have the perspective that there was a real creator God that I could have a relationship with, a personal God, who I now know today. And partially thanks to Kevin, partially thanks to God's hand through Kevin, I was introduced to the what was missing factor. And from there, I gained a whole new perspective after accepting the light, after accepting the side of good first, and then accepting that there was a personal creator God that I could have a personal relationship with. From there, I could look back on my entire life and see where God was, how God was leading me, how I was following God and how I wasn't following God, and what the difference was. And it was just a mind-blowing experience, and there's much information and revelation that was revealed to me at this time after accepting God, and it, every single day since, it's been that way. It is the most clarifying event that ever happened in my life, was accepting the Lord Jesus Christ. So that is where God's hand was in the world in my life. But as you can understand, I didn't see that until I accepted that God was real in the first place.
Absolutely. Because without acceptance, all you're left with is denial. Denial of self, denial of self-worth, denial of self-ability, and always relying and depending upon someone else to be able to produce a result that you yourself could have done in the first place.
Right. So when you source yourself in something other than the ultimate truth, which is a creator God who loves us, then you are pulling from multiple worldly sources to get your image, your worldview of what's real, and it'll never be whole and complete until you find that factor, until you accept that factor.
And that's why you have to have a focus factor in your life to be able to kind of ring some alarm bells in your mind when it comes to information that's going on around the world, and being able to see what's happening on TV and to be able to see what's going on in our own communities. You have to be able to have a godly filter to be able to filter through that, to be able to see what its true intention is in the first place. When you do that, then you'll be able to see God's hand being able to correct, to be able to redirect, and then to be able to inspire other people to be able to take a new path, to be able to go a new way, to be able to do things in a new way. And that's what we teach today, as well as online at inanewway.com.
That's right. So God's hand in the world today is very prevalent in everyone's life because God is the creator of the human soul. He's the creator of who we are at our roots. And so where we build up from those roots can go in multiple directions, but if we stay with God, then those roots are going to grow healthy and strong. Now let's talk about fear. Let's talk about where fear plays a role because, as you know, Kevin, there's many different fearful acts going on in the world today. I don't even have to name them. I'm sure listeners know.
Yes. And the bottom line is that if you are not following every available resource back to God, if you are not trying to be able to find an authentic truth in all this madness, if you're not wanting to be able to take a deep dive into authenticity and to be able to restore your character, to be able to then restore your environment, then all you have left is fear. And fear has been used against us since the creation of man. And listeners, I'm wanting you to be aware that false examples, false impressions, false entities appearing real won't ever get the job done. But when you follow every available resource that is truthful, that is honest, that is purified, that is justified, and authentic, since it's happened through the creation of almost time.
Right. Our recorded history is a great learning resource.
Then it's time for you to be able to get with, to be able to talk with, and to be with someone that can be able to bring you up to speed, because our school systems won't do it. Our neighbors won't do it.
Right, and I'd like to make a comment on that. You see physical education in our school systems now. Where's all the mental health education in our school systems now?
There's not.
It's non-existent.
Well, you've got school counselors.
Right.
But the school counselors are literally paid to be able to keep you in school, to be able to get you muddled through the school system so that you can be a train wreck when you're an adult.
Yes, and one of the reasons that I know you're saying this, Kevin, is because of the textbooks. The textbooks, not only in high schools, not only in elementary schools, but in colleges as well, are outdated.
Yes, but it's more than that. The teaching system is outdated.
Yes, and the history is muddled, too.
Yes. This all has to do with not only bad advertising and bad teaching, but everyone is trying to out-compete the other person. And the bottom line is that the more debt that you consume, the less freedom that you have. And our government is full of enabling you and wanting you to be able to do it. Credit cards and other forms, right?
That's right. Yep.
And then you see the interest rates and everything else. You just can't pay that debt off. But now you got this shiny object that you can't pay off in the first place to be able to show someone else. And the next 90 days from now, it's going to be obsolete. It's going to be old school. And you still have that debt associated and attached to it. But keep in mind, listeners, is that what is happening and has been happening to you is not your fault. That there are literally forces that be that are playing with you emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Being able to con you into needing to be able to get Calvin Klein and all these name brand items when Walmart is just as good.
Hey.
No, literally, people have got a stigma about they have to only go to their name brand store to be able to buy those name brand items. Otherwise, they feel like they're going to get ridiculed or heckled or to be able to be belittled in some way because it isn't a certain name brand. And you see it in advertisements and newspapers all over the place that you got to have this person's name brand all over you. But the bottom line is that not one of these brands pays you, but you pay them all day in a month of Sundays to be able to represent a company that doesn't care about you in the first place.
That's right. So one of the main points I'd like to make here is that, the debt, the credit card debt, if you can afford these things, that's all well and good if you want to be able to spend your money in whatever way you will. But the whole slavery aspect of it is now we have credit cards where you can pay for these things. You can set up financial payment plans that indebt you to an elongated period of financial slavery. And that's what we're addressing here, is that is very fearful for many people. And to be able to follow every available resource available to you, you'll be able to know through that these name brands aren't as wonderful as they say they are, that there are cheaper items that you can be able to purchase that won't enslave you. And that's just one very small example of, how people are enslaved in this day and age.
Well, yeah. And then the next thing is student debt.
Yes. Yep.
But I'm talking about grade school, middle school, and high school educational debt. Just prepping you, just getting you ready for college to be able to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to wait in line, to be able to have a cover photo, to be able to have a profile photo, to be able to have a resume and a cover letter and everything else to be able to hype yourself up to be able to get a job that will keep you in debt for the rest of your life. Because the most authentic job in the world is entrepreneurship, to where
right.
you are not making someone else wealthy. You're making yourself wealthy because you're the owner. And when you take full ownership of your life, and this is following every available resource, when you take full ownership of your life, you start to be able to see through this cloud of injustice of what is going on, not only in the newspapers, not only in magazines, because ladies, you'll be the first one to be able to say, oh, that was Photoshopped. Yes, it is. Why would you want to have a Photoshopped life?
That's right, yeah. You need to learn how to be you in the best way possible, but also how to work your way through this world, navigate through this life in the best way possible. And that's why I think that life coaching is one of the biggest industries in the world today. Life coaching is allowing people who are at a point where they've reached a understanding of how to navigate this world in a way that works and be able to teach that to other people. But It's not taught in schools. There are no life coaches in schools. Like you said, there are counselors, but who knows how well off these counselors are doing in their own lives. Not to bash anyone specifically or anyone at all, but
right. If you don't have the 5 principles in your teaching, you're just smacking yourself.
And those 5 principles are?
Teaching, training, motivating, directing, and guiding.
You might be familiar with that, listeners, if you've been listening to our other podcasts.
So I'll say it again. Teaching, training, motivating, directing, and guiding. The reason why I constantly bring this up and I constantly talk about it is because these are the foundational stepping stones or building blocks to being able to take the mask off of your education and your way of living, to be able to establish a new way, a better way of being able to experience information in its most purest, rawest form that inspires you on a daily basis to be able to be better than the day before.
All right, Kevin. So let's talk about how our omnipresent creator God is working in the world today and why he allows worldly things to happen to good people. Let's shed some light on that in a new way.
Good people that do nothing for God have very malevolent things happen to them. Because what you feed feeds you. What you serve serves you. And if you don't understand who God is, you will. So often at times, we all have been witness to this. And it's not, and again, it's not your fault. But I have seen in my own lifetime very pure, very innocent people having very desperately malevolent things happen to them. And people are like, why? Why me, Lord? Why? Why did this have to happen to me? And the bottom line is that if you're not making a choice on who you're serving, then it's the world that you end up serving, and you become a byproduct of that environment. So in closing on that topic is that if you do not choose whom you're going to worship, then the world automatically puts you into a position, into a place of being used and abused on a daily basis.
Right. So one main point I want to make here is that even if you are righteous, even if you are a man or a woman of God, and you could be completely sinless, there still may be instances in your life where bad things happen to you. But the main difference made in serving the Creator God is you understand His Word, you understand what He teaches about these bad things happening, you understand why they're happening, you understand maybe how it could be used in the future, and it's a new perspective. You see these bad things in a new light, you see them in a new way, where you can now not feel so, oh, woe is me about these things happening, but you can understand where this may be taking you. And even if you don't understand in the moment, you still have the greatest comfort in the entire universe.
Yeah, because understand this, listeners, is that you could have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it happened. It happens to all the best of us. I have been to 45 countries around the world. There's been multiple times that people have tried to mug me and or kill me. And they had no idea who I was. But because it's life and because things happen, you have to be intimately familiar or get familiar with your environment. Why do you think that it's almost, if you want to be able to see God's hand, watch two girls go to the restroom together as a form of protection.
Right.
Why is it that girls bond in that way? Not only is it because it gives them a chance to be able to talk about whomever, right? But it's also a level of protection.
Right. Yep.
It's a built-in mechanism that women have that guys don't have.
Right. And God is a relational God, so He is the connector between relationships. When they are authentic, when they have love involved, they have God involved.
Mm-hmm. And so that's just one example of God's hand. Another example of God's hand within the world is when you have been just busting it and that everything that you've been doing happens to just have gone wrong. And then all of a sudden, at a blink of an eye, something happens. There's a shift that happens in the universe and something pays off. Something ends up happening on a positive note. What God is doing there is that the most faithful get the most reward. You're not necessarily going to get that reward that day, but the more faithful, the more dedicated, and the more honest you are about your dedication and your faith, then produces a reward. And I hate to be able to call it a reward because that almost sounds animal-like, good, faithful dog, whatever.
Right, yep.
But it's a reward of hard work and effort done continuously over and over and over again in hopes of being able to have a purified result.
Yes, and understand, listeners, that God is not a God that works with worldly rewards. Maybe your reward may be found in the world someday, sometime, but it could also be awaiting you in the eternal realm. So that is where we are segueing here now to, is the eternity realm and its benefits.
Yes, and the eternity benefits outweigh the worldly all day, every day.
Right. If you think about it, our lives on this world, whether you live to be 50, whether you live to be 100, eternity is so much greater and grander and longer than that. I don't even know how I could call it long because it doesn't have a start, it doesn't have an end. It's eternity. It's the blink of an eye. It's even less than that, our lives here on earth, all of our suffering, all of our pain. And where we reside in the eternal realm, as long as it is with God, as long as we are in heaven, right, that is an eternal reward that is beyond anything we could experience here on earth.
Right. And we're not saying take one for the team. That is so malevolent.
Right.
That is so, ungodly. The bottom line is that people often ask me as a pastor, why is it that I'm trying to live the very best life that I can here on earth, but I'm just not manifesting the results that I want or need in my life?
Yes, there are many things that we may do in this life that we won't see the ripple effects of until we go to eternity.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And you have to understand is that even the smallest positive example can save a life. There are so many people you have no idea. It wasn't until I was literally given the opportunity or the chance to be able to be made aware of it. But at one particular point in time in my life, I had made a post basically stating that I can't see how all my examples, all the positivity, all the things that I'm doing for people is paying out, because I wasn't getting the comments, I wasn't getting the likes, I wasn't getting, the results that I thought that I needed to have in my life. And God basically, in a quiet moment in my life of quiet desperation, told me it's not about me. It never has been about me. If that you truly serve me and you claim me as Lord, your God, then it's all about the kingdom. It's all about God's people. It's all about God's mission, God's vision, right? And that there are just certain times and situations in life to where no matter how purified that you are as a person, some things just don't work out. But are you taking the time to actually try to listen to God? Or are you more interested in being able to complain to as many people as possible so that you can be able to form this worldly pity party in order for you to be able to feel better about not accomplishing your goal, your dream, or your desire?
Yes. Now, earlier in this podcast, I was talking about how God gave me a new perspective when I accepted him on what was happening in my life up until that point. One major aspect of that was I was able to see how the failures in my life were actually training me to get to a point where I could be doing what I'm doing today. The failures in my life were actually molding me into the person who I would be becoming in order to be able to do the works that he wills for me to do in this day. So your failure in life is not actually failure. It is a lesson learned. It is intended to be a growth aspect in your life.
Correct. More importantly, it's truly designed, if you're actually laying things at Jesus' feet, to be a stepping stone one step closer to God. Here's what I mean. How often do we actually thank God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, for this negative situation happening? How often are you thankful for even the bad things happening in your life? To be able to have an experience, to be able to experience something bad that you never wanted to experience, but being able to be of a high enough caliber of a person to be able to experience the good and the bad and to be thankful for it. Now, honestly, there's no one on the planet that is looking forward to being able to have a bad circumstance or a bad situation.
Right.
But if you looked at it through purified godly eyes, you would then look at it completely different.
Right. That's the new perspective. Being thankful for the bad things that have happened to you allows you to free yourself from the burden of stressing about those things from this moment forth.
Plus, it frees you from the attachment emotionally, physically, spiritually from that situation.
That's why forgiveness is such a powerful thing. When we forgive those who have harmed us, we free ourselves from the burden of being slaves in fear to them, because fear is slavery.
Right.
It's misunderstanding.
But the authentic slavery in life is you.
It's your choice, yes.
Well, not only that, but because you have to be able to mirror image the next person in line, is that you start to lose your authenticity one step at a time, to where you eventually get to a point where I don't even know who I am. I don't even know why I'm doing what I'm doing, right?
That's right, yep.
So when you're following every available resource back to God, back to the source, back to all positivity, all accomplishments in your life, is that even your greatest negative experience is a saving grace, because you had the audacity and the integrity and the ability to be able to learn from that mistake and not then wish it or will it upon someone else moving forward.
Yes, so there's not only a great power in empowerment, in self-empowerment, in a personal relationship with our wonderful Creator, but there is also a great power in the perspective shift when you have a relationship with the Creator, when you know that He loves you intimately, when you know that you are in His hands, when you know that whatever events occur in your life, you can trust and rely on this God. That's the shift that's made. That's where you no longer are so conformed to the world because of these bad things happening, but you are able to deal with them, or at least have a new perspective of them, to not go insane, because that's what you're talking about, being conformed.
Absolutely. And it's not shameful, it's not disgraceful, it's not a sign of weakness to be able to reach out to a counselor, a life coach, someone that can be able to put you right back on the right pathway, instead of being able to repeat over and over and over and over, like a skipping record, the same mistakes over and over again. But a lot of people much rather not humble themselves, but to be able to use pride and to be able to make mistakes over and over and over and over and over and over again. But they find this comedic, enjoyable system called a lie to be able to lie it away. Well, it's not my fault. It's not my circumstance. It's not my situation. Other people, outside influences, something else happened, but it could never be my fault.
Yes, and we'll be talking more about these in future episodes. We're going to finish this episode up. Do you have any last words to say, Kevin?
Yes. It's that you have the ultimate power and authority by the grace of God to be able to overcome anything and everything that comes to you. And that the highest level of self-empowerment is authenticated truth. And if you're looking for authenticated truth in a new way, I encourage you to be able to type into your browser www.inonewway.com, and I look forward to being able to see you posting your comments, your concerns, your interests on our webpage, and like it and share it, and be able to share it with those people that you love. And then on top of that, we have another complementing system that we have merchandise available that it really inspires you to be able to really lifts you up, and it really encourages you on a daily basis, because when you get to be able to see a statement on your shirt that matters to you, then it resonates with everyone else too. And that could be your source of positivity starting today. So please feel free to be able to check out our website. Please feel free to be able to check out our other podcasts, our other videos on all these great subjects, and like it and share it. Other than that, I wish you nothing but the very best, because the very best is you, because God created you that way.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, listeners. We will see you in the comments section. We look forward to seeing what information you can provide on inanewway.com, and we will meet you on the next episode of Omnipresent Information Connection.
All right. This has been another life-enhancing, authenticated podcast aired by the OIC and brought to you by the faithful OIC sponsors and contributors. Please tune in every week and subscribe to our podcast. And while you're there, explore our website with all the posts, videos, and podcasts that we have created with you in mind. While you're on the journey through our website, you will see our Patreon page where you can become a faithful contributor yourself with the freedom to be a part of our team today. Thank you.